hands. They're very expressive. I love to look at them. Most of us work with them, but I really love to draw them, to paint them, and that's what today's program is all about. When I thought about today's program, I worried just a little bit about drawing hands. It seems this is one of the things that bothers young students most, drawing hands. I've seen so many examples of this in a life drawing class. Student comes in and draws the figure fairly well, but always managed to neglect the hands and the feet. Drawing a hand really shouldn't be any more difficult than drawing anything else. It should be observation. It should be a matter of looking at it coldly, objectively, if you can do this, and going on with the business of drawing. I think really what you have to do, basically, is to take the plunge. It's like learning to swim. If you don't start drawing hands, you're never going to learn how to do them. Today, I'd like to maybe dispel some of your fears. Do a few things here on paper with chalk and pencil to show you how it might become a little easier to draw a hand. Now, as I draw, I think you might like to know who the hands that I'm drawing belong to. They belong to Larry McMahon, who's a colleague of mine in the engineering department here at the university. He's going to submit to my wishes in terms of what I would like him to do with the hands, expressive poses, things of this kind. Now, looking at his hands, let's start here. Larry, I wonder if you could just put your palm down flat on the table toward me. One of the things I'd like to say about drawing a hand is that it has a kind of, well, you might say a simple structure, if we think of it as being something like this. Here, let's turn to the paper. A hand could be thought of as being a fan. Here's the wrist part of the hand, and then the fingers go out this way. And the hand divides so that you have the back of the hand here, which, by the way, if you look here, this part of the back of the hand is about half of the total length of the hand. From the fingers to the wrist is divided in half by the large knuckles. Okay? Then, when we come down a little bit further, we have the first knuckles, which are about here, and the second knuckles about here, and the fingers radiate. Into this fan shape that I talked about. One other thing that maybe I ought to make a little bit clearer, I made it simpler to begin with by making these lines straight across, but we must understand that, like a fan, as things move this way from a central point, there has to be an arc created, as if we were to use a compass. You see, the same thing applies to Larry's knuckles. These knuckles really should be drawn as a sweep this way, and the second knuckles do this, and the smaller knuckles do this, and then this results, for instance, in the ends of the fingers being a little shorter or longer in relationship to that arc that I've traced. I hope that that's clear to you. Now, this is the basic structure of the hand. You can think of a keystone shape like this. You can also think of it in this way. Let's draw over here. I'll draw a smaller form for you, but the back of the hand could be a keystone shape, and then the fingers closed or brought together could be another equal keystone shape turning around upside down against the first one. And if we take a line through the center of this space, then divide that again over here and again over here, there are the fingers. I'm not talking about the thumb, because the thumb is a little bit of a stickler, but let's try to put the thumb onto this. It really starts back here at the wrist, and the tendons for the thumb go way back up into the arm, the tendons and the muscles, way up in here. So it starts here, but the first knuckle of the thumb manages to come along here at a spot that is close to the large knuckles over here, but then things fall apart a little bit, and the thumb goes its own way and fits along the side of the hand like this. That's a kind of a diagrammatic or schematic way of looking at a hand. Now, I really don't believe that this is helpful only to a limited extent. I think there are all kinds of systems for drawing. You know, things like putting a circle here and another circle there, and then pretty soon that adds up to something else. I don't believe in that, really. I really believe that when you look at a hand, well, as I did at the beginning of the show, when I started drawing Larry's hand, if we can see here what I did for a moment, you see, I really started out by drawing what you might call all of the bumps, the forms on his first finger, on his index finger. I even went so far as to begin to indicate to myself the way that his thumbnail, or rather his index fingernail, would be within that finger. I didn't stop to say that this should be part of this, or that it ought to be built as a square shape or a round shape. I just started drawing. Now really, essentially, that's what you have to do when you draw. But there are these other little systems like this thing up here, which has to do with the keystone shapes that I've just told you about, and making it easier for you to figure out how wide the fingers have to be, because you divide this in half and then again in half. This sort of thing is helpful. We can look at other things that might be helpful too. After all, the hand is not two-dimensional. It has a quality of being three-dimensional. Let me remove this sheet of paper so that I'll have other space to work on. In order to save paper, let's just turn it around. Okay. Now, the hand also can be thought of as something as having three dimensions. What if we think of the back of Larry's hand? Larry, can you turn your hand now so that it's lengthwise to the table? Okay. I think that works pretty well now. We can think of Larry's hand as fitting basically into this kind of a shape. Here's the thumb going down into the wrist in here. Again, you see how I draw without hesitation. I'm drawing what I think I see in terms of the contours of Larry's hand. And this will be where the wrist is. By the way, do you know what the wrist is? I think most people consider the wrist to be this hinge, the separation between the arm and the back of the hand. The wrist is really not there. The wrist lies between this point and in here, where there are a whole bunch of little bones called cuneiform bones, and these are hidden in the back of the hand along with the first phalanges, or the first joints of your fingers. So let's make a little line here. I wanted to show you something about the three-dimensional quality of the hand. This is where I'm going to begin to get into that. What do these lines do? Can you see what I'm driving at here? When I draw these lines, you actually don't see them on Larry's hand. They're not there, because you see tendons, you see veins, you see light and shadow. But what I'm trying to get you to see is a sense of the form of the back of Larry's hand. Now let's get back to my drawing. What I'm trying to show you here is that my hand is round from here to here. It's not flat like this pencil is flat. You see, the pencil has to rock over the roundness of the back of my hand. My knuckles fit on an arc that does this. So these lines begin to set up this business of the back of the hand being rounded in here and in here. And as I told you, the first finger bones, the phalanges, this is a phalange here. The first phalanges fit from here to here on my hand. But back in here, these are the small bones of the wrist. So my wrist is here. These are the first phalanges, then the second, the third, and fourth joints of the finger. So one of these joints then is hidden. Actually, it's in here like this, you see? Tied together by many muscles. Those first bones of the finger are in here. But then when we get in here, as I showed you, the knuckles rise to go over each of the bones in the back of the hand, and you have this kind of a shape. This, by the way, is the end of the arm bone that I'm drawing right in here. Then the wrist going down in here into the first knuckle of the little finger. Can you see this now? Now that rides over the top of his knuckles. I made a little mistake here. Let me change this a bit more. Okay. Now the fingers. How do they fit into the back of the hand? Okay, let's work that out. First of all, the fingers are circular in cross-section. You know what I mean by cross-section? My finger is round, like this pencil is round. The same sort of general idea. So I should understand this, and that's what this does for me. It begins to set up the fact that each finger is a rounded shape, a cylinder, that is pushed into the back of the hand. Neat and easy, isn't it? Now we can extend these fingers individually. The index finger, out from that point. You see how I draw the knuckle over here to show that the finger now is changing direction, the perspective goes so that back in this direction. I want to point out and make a very, very strong emphasis upon this particular little idea that when you draw hands, you should make every effort to emphasize, exaggerate where the joints are, as I did here, you see, and as I'm doing here. And then the last joint of the finger. And here. The other fingers do the same thing. Now look how this one separates from the back of the hand, comes down in here like this. Follows the other one, disappears back in here. See how I draw this? Again, I keep the idea of this going. The idea of accenting where the knuckles are. And I change this. I want you to understand that as I draw, I don't have any better vision than you do or any better understanding of what's going to happen. I start drawing, well, very much as I do when I start talking on these programs. I really don't know exactly what I'm going to say. I'm going to talk about hands, of course. But the words as they come out are new to me. It's the same way in drawing. I think so many times students and beginners at this sort of thing want to do it perfectly. Not only that, but they want me to do it perfectly. They want me to be able to draw that line exactly right the first time. Sometimes I'm lucky, but I also have to lean upon what you might call kind of feedback. I do something and then I recognize that it's not quite right and then I change it. This is what you have to do too. So you should make mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. These things are part of learning how to draw. By making mistakes, and if you're aware of this and willing to understand that it is a mistake, then you can do something about it. Isn't that true? But if you're going to sit there worrying about it, whether every line is right or wrong, you're never going to draw. So I am changing things as I go along here, and I'm admitting it. I was wrong about this knuckle. See, I should have brought here. Evidently, the arch of the hand, as I saw it, was more exaggerated. There it goes again. You see, I cautioned you a moment ago to exaggerate, and here after drawing 40 or 50 years practically, I forget to do that myself. So do as I tell you. Exaggerate, make mistakes, learn from them. Okay, let's get to the thumb a little bit, as this is part of the structure that has to be defined here. I'd like to point out to you that as I draw, I hold the pencil in a special way. You see how I hold the pencil so that the line comes out of the end of the pencil like this? I don't hold the pencil and draw transverse to the line. You know what I mean by that? I make the line flow out of the pencil as if it were a string flowing out of a spool or something of this kind. And my arm goes with this. I don't draw this way. I draw with my arm. The swing of my arm makes this possible, makes it possible for me to draw in a relaxed way. I know that you're probably accustomed to drawing with the pencil and that you've learned how to write your name and such and with a pencil, and you have a particular kind of attitude towards how you should use a pen or a pencil or a chalk, which comes to us because of, of our background and the way we see things. But when you draw, you don't hold the pencil like this because you don't want to make small strokes. You want to be able to make long swinging strokes that go through the form of the object, whatever it is that you draw. Do I use an eraser? Yeah, I use an eraser now and again. I think I ought to use an eraser here because I think I turned this finger up a little bit too much. Now let's swing to another idea about drawing hands while we're right here at the end of this finger, because it has a fingernail, doesn't it? And this seems to be a bugaboo, drawing fingernails. Let me show you something about drawing a fingernail. Let's make a little diagram again on the right-hand side of the sheet over here. Here's the tube or the cylinder of the finger. This is the end of the finger. Okay? If you want to draw fingernails easily, forget about the fact that they have an individual shape to begin with. Now later on, of course, you have to deal with the fact that some nails are pointed, others are flat. But to begin with, think of a finger as being a kind of a cylindrical shape. See, it's round this way, just like this is round this way. This is going back in space away from me, isn't it true? It's very easy to see that. Now, if you can draw this, then it's very easy to put a flat tab on the end of the cylinder, see, like this, and it goes back into space and it becomes a fingernail. Let me draw a little bit more now. Now, that may be a little bit too diagrammatic for you, but let's fill it out a bit. and make it more into a finger. Okay, there are the knuckles. Here's the cuticle. We'll bring this in here, round it a little bit more, the shape of the end of the finger. Now that looks pretty convincing as a fingernail, doesn't it? And that's what you ought to be thinking of. Look, very quickly, another one here. Think of the fingernail as a little flat tab on the end of the finger. Get away from the business of thinking about that pointed, manicured nail, because once you do, you're lost. Just do it this way to begin with. Later on, you can begin to modify that. Let's do some other things with Larry's hands. I'd like to talk a little bit about anatomy. I'm not sure that anatomy is the best thing to introduce to a beginning student. I think it can be very, very confusing, but you ought to know a few things. It makes it possible to think about the hand abstractly or schematically. Do you know what I mean? When you think about the structure of something, it lends information that makes it possible for you to look with a little bit more insight into what it is that's there. So what are fingers? You know, the fingers are part of the hinge. Let's see, let's do this with my hand here. When I do this, you see, they can't bend sideways, very, very little. They can only bend like this, you see? So that my hand can do all kinds of things. Look, it can be very, very expressive, can it? Just the way that those muscles show up, or it can be something quite different. But the fact is that the fingers have to bend around hinge points. Let me draw quickly what I'm talking about. Each finger is a mechanism that looks something like this. Has a little pin here upon which it revolves, and around here then is another section that does this. See? And that swings around in here. There are muscles that go back in here, and a tendon that comes around over this and attaches down in here. You see, like this, attaches down in here, and when that tendon is pulled upon by the muscle back in here, why then it makes the finger work. Now, knowing this, then this ought to reinforce what I said about the business of exaggerating the joints. You should do this because this is part of the mechanism of the hand. If you can show people that you understand the structure, the way the hand works, then I think that this means a great deal in terms of making it possible for you to draw hands more easily and also to draw them with some conviction. Larry, I'd like to do a little bit of a finish drawing in the last remaining minutes. Would you put your hand up to your jaw like this? Now, that's a little too bunched together. Do something where your fingers are a little farther apart and under your chin a bit more definitely. No, the other way around, to the upper side of your face. Now, that's it. Okay, if we can see a little bit of his hand and his wrist, a bit more of his wrist, then I think we can continue drawing. Now, I'm going to draw and just have fun drawing the way that I like to draw. I think it's fun to watch somebody else draw. Or it's like watching someone who swims well or who plays golf well. It's part of the business. I don't like to do this too much. I think sometimes a teacher who works too much for the student, all he does is to reveal his own virtuosity and really doesn't teach the student a great deal. So to me, it's much more important to get at the basic ideas. And I want you to see how I draw, because I'm sure you will find that other teachers will insist that you draw differently. Don't feel that I'm wrong and they're right or vice versa. Just feel that we're different kinds of draftsmen. I'm a linear kind of a draftsman. I like to draw in line. I like to see things clearly cut. I think a line does that. I think a line shows me exactly where things are, just like in a mechanical drawing. The line defines the edge of the measurement. It shows you what you're dealing with. And I feel that when I draw, I like to draw in the same spirit of drawing with things that are definite and defined. Now, other people like to draw more with masses of tone. I'll try to get to a little of that just as soon as I can. But you see, my main accent is really the idea of working with a linear quality. This is a line. And each finger develops out of a kind of faith that I have that it's going to be okay. I know that my eyes and my hands will follow each other and define shapes pretty much as I see them. If I don't know that after 40 years of drawing and painting, why, I think I would have stopped a long time ago. Okay, here are the knuckles, you see. I wonder how many of you have noticed the color of the paper that I've been working on. In a way, I guess you might say that I'm not only drawing, but I'm also painting. I'm working on a toned paper. This pale green paper that you see on your screen is veritably yellow-green. That's what it is. I'm doing that, as you will see in a moment, so that I can add a little color to my drawing. It's almost a painting, as you will see. Now, that makes sense. Does it look like a hand? Looks pretty much like a hand to me. And going down into the wrist, separation of the wrist from the arm. Okay, now this is a heightened drawing. By that I mean, what I'm dealing with is working with a toned paper and then putting dark and light chalk on it to get a sense of roundness that you wouldn't get just with white paper and a black pencil, or a toned paper and a black pencil. So let's do just a little bit of that. We can start right here, say with this finger. I know that the light is coming from above in the studio, and this part of his finger, Larry's finger, is in shadow. Can you see what I've done? And right along here is the edge of the shadow. Then I accent the knuckle and where it goes into the tendon of the back of the hand. Come along here and quickly do this to the other finger. See how I swing the pencil into place? Again, that's using my wrist and my arm. I want you to notice that the shadow gets a little bit darker where it meets the light. Then I can come along with my light chalk, which in this case is white, and begin heightening the drawing. This is where the light falls. Where there's more light, I apply more chalk. It's as simple as that. And I go back and forth. I don't like to mix the dark chalk and the light chalk. I don't think that's a good idea. I leave areas open for one or the other. There's that little flat tab of a fingernail. I wonder if the camera can pick up the way that I'm able to get a little bit of feeling of stronger light falling on the, see on this part of the finger, here on the edge of this knuckle, the bone sticks out a little bit more. Okay. Now I have a kind of little problem here because his face casts a shadow onto his middle finger. So I have a dark line along in here, and then the shadow cast from the face onto his finger does this. And it goes right down here along the inside edge of the finger, and it sort of makes the light and shade work opposite the way that it actually should be, because the light comes from over here, so that this should be lighter. Okay, let's get this fingernail working. And keep building. I've been drawing, as I've told you a couple of times already during this program, for many years. But it's interesting to me that as I draw, I find myself getting into the mood of it. You know, I just don't set out drawing and feel the same way about it in the first few minutes as I do after I've gotten into the drawing. I really develop a much greater sense of freedom after a little while. It's like warming up to it, I guess, that makes things really better for me as I draw. All of a sudden, I just find things fitting together. I can do things more easily. I believe often students and beginners give up a little bit too quickly. They just don't see that right around the corner, if I can use that expression, is the rest of their drawing. They just have to feel satisfied that it ought to be there right away, and if it isn't there right away, something is wrong. And sometimes maybe we make too much of the business of spontaneity, of the idea that things have to be done at first shot, you know, that if they're not, why something is wrong. I'm not so sure about that. Working at these things, you see, just gives you that sense of security. And if you really believe in something, you know, you're willing to put that time into it. So, that's about all that I can show you today about the problem, but I don't think it's a problem of drawing hands.